the Matt Cubbler podcast show.
What is up, Facebook land?
2 dates and a dash.
That's my man right there, Sonny Tannan. Before I introduce him, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the 2 Dates and a Dash podcast. I am your host, Matt Cubbler. And as I just mentioned, Sonny Tannan is my special guest. Before I tell you all about him and let him speak about his life and his journey through this life, I want to first dedicate the show, as I always do. I would be completely remiss if I didn't dedicate this show to dads, since we are the day after Father's Day. I made a post yesterday, a video post, kind of just sort of sharing my thankfulness for the dad that I didn't have and the 2 dads that I did have. I've been blessed in my life to have 2 men who stepped up and became father figures for me. My stepdad, Paul Jones, who is my dad, and then Chuck Gilroy, who is a man who allowed me to come and live in his home and treated me like one of his kids when I was in high school. And, to this day, he still calls me son, and I call him dad, and he's just a great human being. And, unfortunately, my biological father was a shitty dad, and he just wasn't capable of performing the task of being a dad. But his losses, my stepdad and Chuck Gilroy's gain. So I dedicate this show to everybody who stepped up, whether you're a birth father, whether you're a stepfather, whether you're a mentor, somebody who stood up and said, I'm going to have your back. I'm going to help guide you and mold you into the person that I believe you're capable of becoming. So every man that's ever done that, thank you. And this dedication is for you, to all the dads out there. The podcast, where can you hear the podcast? Anywhere. iTunes, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, Anchor, you name it. That's where you can find the podcast. The audio version, video versions are on YouTube or my website, mattcubbler.com. Facebook, obviously, is where you're going to find them the most. And I got told I'm a shitty salesman because I never talk about my book. So A Brother's Love, a Memoir. There you have it. Now somebody can get off my ass. I'm not a good self-promoter, but I am very proud of that book because it was my dedication to my brother and the way that I can share him with the world. So if you're interested, it's on Amazon. If you go to my website, you can find the book there. So wherever you want to find that book, I would appreciate anybody that is willing to take the time to read it. And if you feel so inclined to leave me a review on Amazon, that'd be fantastic. So my man, Sonny. Sonny is, he's a diverse dude. He is a Marine veteran, first of all. And I was going to say a former Marine, but I know once you're a Marine, you're always a Marine. We don't want to have that conversation. As a prior Army guy, I will say that, we just had the Army's birthday.
Happy birthday.
And to thank you, 244 years of the greatest fighting force ever assembled. And then there's the Marines who obviously come in and clean up everything that we mess up. I get it. But Sonny is a Marine. He is an author of an amazing children's series, which right there over his shoulder. You can grab that if you want, brother. There it is. Through the Eyes of Ohm, who is his son, and I'm sure he'll talk diligently about him. He is a speaker. He's a video content creator for LinkedIn and a bunch of other crap, and does all kinds of business consulting, entrepreneurial type stuff. Otherwise, a great human being. We got to talk about 3 months ago. And I really wanted him on the show. So I thank you, brother, for being on. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Sonny Tannan.
Matt, I appreciate it. First of all, I am absolutely honored to be on your show. You have had 39 episodes, right?
You're number 39.
So 38 amazing guests that have been on here. And I urge you, if you haven't gone on there, go all the way back to, I think it was episode, I got to give it a shot. I think it was episode 2 that you had an absolutely amazing guest. And all the other ones are wonderful too. I think you just had Kurt Schilling recently. So I'm just blown away when I go back and look at who your guests have been, that I'm actually on here talking on the same type of show that 2 Dates and a Dash with the Matt Cubbler. So thanks for having me.
I appreciate it, brother. Now, you've seen at least one episode, but I know you've watched 3 or 4 at least. So you know the way the show goes. I ask one question, and then we kind of figure it out from there. So I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Kurt Schilling, Vince Papale, Irish Mickey Ward, Jillian Mealy. I'm going to ask you, who is Sonny Tannan?
Yeah, you know what? I always say this to people. I say, what a great question. And I think that I wish there was a simple answer that was out there, but we're both veterans. And so I'm going to come back to that question, if you don't mind. I just wanted to say one thing first. In honor of Father's Day, you've already given an awesome shout out. And it comes back to who is Sonny Tannan. But, I'm a dad. I'm absolutely a dad, but I have been led, much like yourself, by amazing both women and men in my life. But I have to give a special shout out to my dad, who, without his discipline, without his love, without just him being him and still continue to be him, I am most definitely the man I am today because of him. And the reason I say that is because it's interesting. So both of our military backgrounds, and I'm sure this is very similar to you. I entered the Marine Corps a little bit later than most join up. I was 28 years old. And for me, I would say safely, half of my Marines that were there came from single families and typically broken families. And the majority of times it was the dads, nothing against them. It was just the dads that weren't the ones that were there and present in their lives. And so the reason why I come back to I'm a dad first is because, my son Ohm is 3. He's going to be turning 4 in 2 days. And I wanted to be a present dad. And that's nothing against any other dads that for whatever reason aren't able to be there, maybe by their choice or maybe by unknown circumstances or unforeseen circumstances. But I say I'm a dad first because I think it's absolutely imperative for me to be a part of his life and to guide him and to help him and to understand and to share with him what it takes to be a steward and a responsible community member as he continues to grow and thrive. And it's not just my responsibility. It's, my wife's responsibility. It's, his family's responsibility. And so I trace that back to the upbringing of my dad and, the other half of me, my better half, my wife, her dad unfortunately passed away almost a year ago to this day. And he, of all the people, we talk about this all the time when we celebrate his anniversary of passing, he also was the type of dad that, if I could have known him for a longer time, that I would want my son to become like. So I feel like I'm really blessed to have had 2 absolutely amazing men in our lives, Ohm and myself and my wife, because I think that's important. And it's not just about dads. There's so much more that goes to it, to family upbringing. But for me, who is Sonny Tannan is, I'm a dad first. I'm definitely a veteran. I'm somebody that believes in leaving this place a better place, but by showing that to Ohm and to the others that are around me, by helping them to figure out what it is that they want to do. But it always comes back to family and being a dad.
Well, first of all, happy early birthday to your son.
Appreciate it.
4 is a big year. I remember mine are 21 and 16. So they haven't been 4 for quite a while. But I remember when my son was born when my daughter was 4 and 4.5. And I just remember, first of all, we planned it that way because I wanted to have a servant. I wanted to have somebody that I could go, and if I told you to go get a diaper, you came back with a diaper. Like that's kind of what I wanted to make sure happened. And so when we had Andrew, Becca, she was like my helper. She was the one who would always want to do the bottle, want to make sure she changed diapers and learned how to do all that and read in books and did all that. So that was her 4-year-old self, which was really, really cool to watch. A 4-year-old with a newborn little brother. They fight like cats and dogs now, but back then my daughter was the best big sister in the history of big sisters. So 4 is a great year. Yeah,
things to look forward for. And it's amazing because I think hands down, every single parent that's out there, once their kids get to certain ages, and there's no set number, but hands down, unequivocally, just like the story you just shared is, every single parent is just like, enjoy it. Like enjoy this time because you're never going to get it back. There's going to be different milestones, different things that you're going to enjoy along the way, but he's never going to be 3 again. Some of the things that he sees today where, I've really tried to The book that I wrote is Through the Eyes of Om, but everything that I've done, from the videos to the book to trying to see the world through his eyes and his perspective, it really is about trying to enjoy it as a 3-year-old again for me. So, I mean, perfect example today, he came in and came home from school, and we're sitting there. His newest game right now is playing Monsters. And so his perspective of it's this hugely creative game for him, where he says, all right, this is what I want to be. This is how I'm going to be that. And he's like, Dad, I need your help to make this. So for example, he's like, I want to be a red monster. So he's got these magical potions and whatever, and he throws into this pot. He's like, all right, Dad, throw me into the pot. So I got to throw him into the pot. And then he comes out and he's a red monster. And I'm like, how hugely creative is that? Like, this is the stuff as you get older, once he gets past that 3 and he's a little bit older, I'm going to be like, do you remember when you used to play Monsters? And he'd be like, Dad, he's like, don't embarrass me. Like, that was so when I was 3, like, just stop that. So I'm enjoying it now because it's okay for me to enjoy it while he's still 3. After that, when he's just like your kids' ages, it's a totally different story. There'll be other things that we'll play then.
I think I was picking my nose at 4. I don't think there was anything I did special at 4 years old that makes me stand out. I don't think I had any of those creative juices. I mean, in this picture, I'm probably, I'm here. I'm the little one. I would have to say I'm probably 2 or 3 in that picture. And I think you can see I was picking my nose. So that's literally, I think that was me for most of my early years. So, all right. So let's talk about your son, and let's talk about the genesis of writing a book. I wrote a book as a result of a loss. You're writing a book to chronicle the life of your son through his eyes. So let's talk about that. It's completely different, coming from 2 different angles. But where did you come up with the idea of writing a book about your son?
Yeah, great question. And I think, we've both taken 2 wildly different approaches to it, but both are, in my mind, the word that comes to me is inspirational, right? Because, you wrote something that had depth and meaning to you, that struck a heart chord for you. And then it allowed you to share your story literally straight from the heart and to put it out there for others to read because it was that important and impactful for you. I feel the exact same way about Through the Eyes of Om. And so I have to back up about 1.5 years now, where don't ask me how this happened, Matt, but for some reason, whatever reason, LinkedIn, when they first came out with LinkedIn video, chose me as one of the, don't hold me to this number, but there was probably about 100 of us that were creating at the very beginning. So 1.5 years, almost 2 years ago now. And my very first video, and hands down, when I talk with roughly 60 or 70 of these creators, we almost have the exact same stories, where it was like, well, we had it for a little bit, we weren't too sure what we wanted to do with it, and then either we just started creating videos, or we put a lot of thought into it and then started to script out videos. Well, I can tell you, this is how our videos started. Om happened to be sitting on a couch. I was there with him. His mom was at work. I think it was Labor Day weekend, if I'm not mistaken. And we were just having a really cool interaction. We were just sitting there playing, and he was just being, as charming as he is. And I just hit record on the video. And that was our very first video. So LinkedIn video, just getting the opportunity to create videos on LinkedIn, has led almost indirectly and directly to the birth of Through the Eyes of Om. So what has been really amazing for me is that our videos, 95% of the time, are on one take. Literally, and as we've progressed on our videos, and Om has become more articulate and starting to kind of share his own thoughts a little bit more, we've definitely continued to transform and have an evolution of how we share videos with our community. But at the very first one, it was one take. And the 95% is because there are definitely times where he's like, I don't want to make a video, and I will hit stop. So that's for me as a dad, to respect his wishes to stop right there. And that's why we're not 100% on one take videos. But all the other ones that everybody sees, it's literally hitting record and saying, all right, here's our topic, here's what we're doing, or just recording a really cool interaction between the 2 of us. So a father and a son. I had enough people start to say, wow, like, we love the interactions. We love how to see how you, and we were just doing it for ourselves. And you and I were talking about this before we started the podcast, where, we were doing it because that's who we are. And the buzzword out there is authentic. Got it. It for you and me, it's just us being us, right? So you being you, me being me. And that bond between Om and myself, we wanted to share that with other people, not to gain anything from it, but just to say, here's how a dad and a son interact, and we want you to enjoy these moments with us. And so enough people said, well, have you ever thought about writing a book about it and chronicling it? And I think somebody even mentioned, like a thought of like a time capsule. And I said, how hilarious is this, that here we are in a digital age and people are saying, you make these great videos. Well, go back to traditional print and write a book. And if you had asked me, almost 2 years ago when we started making these videos, hey, Sonny, are you going to write a book, let alone a children's book? They're definitely not in the cards. There's no way you would ever catch me saying, yep, that's my big why. That's my big goal. I'm going to write a children's book about me and Om. So it's been absolutely amazing adventure for us to create these books. And it's the first in a series. So Om is 3, and he's been to about 8 countries so far. We have 2 more that we're doing this summer. And so I would love to keep chronicling these different journeys in different countries just to showcase to the world that it really is a small place. I mean, good word. Here we are on a platform sharing videos and audio, right? So your podcast with how many millions of viewers around the world or listeners. And we never would have been able to do this if we didn't have access to this technology. So the book is just another medium because some people love to just open up the books. They like to flip the pages. And in our instance, we want kids to sit down with their parents, read through this book, and eventually have that kid starting to read back to their parents. So I believe so strongly in having the bonding of the parent, spending those times, coming off of digital for just a minute, but going back to the traditional learning sense, the hearing sense, the visual sense. And in our books, just like I told you, the first thing was I'm about family. I'm a dad first. Each of these books has a theme of family, or like in this instance, we actually went to visit my wife's family. So got to meet his great grandmother for the very first time and his grandparents for the very first time. It's about anxiety. It's about overcoming obstacles. It's about sharing what that experience is like. And then it's about adventure. Why not? Why can't we still be curious and be adventurous just like when we were younger kids? With all our experiences as we become adults, it's a lot of things where we have preconceptions. So maybe, we think that a certain thing will happen because that's what happened to us in the past. Well, the book for me has allowed me to become curious again and to really try and understand what the world looks like as Om is experiencing it. And what ended up happening was absolutely amazing. We actually ended up, so I think I can officially say it now. We actually ended up having a fairly large brand that approached us and said, we love the style of your story. We would love to use Om to showcase what we do as a brand. And this brand is the Children's National Hospital in Washington, D.C. It's the Rare Diseases Institute. So it's they wanted to showcase how a child walked through a genetics clinic and how they experience things that maybe they just don't know. It's rare diseases, so they may not know what's going on. But to be able to showcase to the patients, the siblings, which could be kids, and the parents that, there are really things that you may not understand, but that's what this team, Children's National, that's what this team is here to help them understand. And so, we just submitted our first script for that. And, fingers crossed that this book will be out before the end of the year. So we're super. We partnered with the brand that we believe in and that we want to help other children understand that Om is a 3, soon to be 4-year-old that's just like them. He experiences the same thing. He's a normal kid that and needs some help, and luckily his dad is there to learn more from him than he probably learns from me. I'll be honest about it.
I think the concept of sharing the life of your son through his eyes in a book is phenomenal. I can still, reading to my kids was one of the highlights of my day. Being able to just lay in bed with them and share those moments with them. Brown Bear, Good Night Moon. All these books that I read thousands and thousands of times over and over again. They stick with you forever. And I'm 48 years old. My daughter's 21, and I'm 20 years ago, I was reading those books to her. But yet I could probably still recite 90% of both of those books by heart. And you can create something that is very personal to you, that this is your your tribute to your son. This is your tribute to your life experience with your son as he grows and evolves into the young man that you're hoping he becomes. You get a chance to share that, not only through your videos, but also through the pages of a book, so that some dad somewhere around the world is laying in bed with his kid, reading through the eyes of Om to his son or daughter in a way that is magical and meaningful to them, so that 20 years from now, they're reciting that book by heart. I think that's pretty cool.
I appreciate that. And I think there's actually two things that, our hashtag is we're fans of three. So I'll just share three things with you real quick on the book about it. The book and what it's meant to not only us, but to other people. So it's really interesting. The videos that we create, there was actually a mom that reached out to me a couple of times and said, this is what, my son, how he reacts when he's seen your videos. And, when we sign off on our videos and on the book as well is, we do a fist bump and then he blows a kiss. And she said that her son, when he saw that for the first time, he was like, boom, boom. And so I was like, oh, that's great. So you want to give him like a fist bump, boom, boom. And she's like, no, he's autistic. And his safe word, or when he's enjoying something, is he says, boom, boom. And I was like, oh man, we will always fist bump and blow a kiss from here on out. Like that, there's no two ways about it. And, it's like that one impactful moment for me when I'm going to share that with them and he can actually clearly understand the meaning behind what he was doing and how he was touching another child's life and a mom. Like that's the thing that gets me really going. That's the thing that really makes me know that we are impacting and we are leaving a lasting impression on somebody. And we may never meet them ever in our lives, and if we do, that'd be awesome. But even if we don't, we know that we've made a positive impact in their life. And, so that's the first one. The second one is, this one cracks me up beyond belief. Whenever I go to networking events, I've had the pleasure of speaking at a couple of LinkedIn local events, a couple of events overseas, and I go in there and I swear, I kid you not, as a parent, you will appreciate this. I have most networking events occur in the evening, right? So, 6 o'clock after work, whatnot, a typical working day. I kid you not, most people are like, where's Om? And I'm like, what? They say, yeah, why didn't you bring Om? I was like, 6 o'clock. He's 3. He's hopefully in bed by now. Hopefully he had his dinner, his shower, brushed his teeth, and he's sleeping. And they're like, yeah, but we kind of wanted to meet him. And I'm like, what about me? But it tickles me pink, the fact that they want to meet him because of just the way that he interacts and that, his presence on camera. And he's just coming into his own. He's just getting started. So it tickles me pink that people are like, well, we want to meet Om. And, the third story that I'm going to share with that is that when we do have the pleasure of actually meeting people, it is amazing how, he's pretty social, but he's kind of like me. Like he takes time. You and I are kind of like this. Like, there's certain times where you don't want to be around people, right? Or, you just need your me time. He's very much like that. He's very much an observer. So, kind of like your Intel background. He sits back kind of in a corner. He kind of susses out the situation. He kind of sees where he wants to go, what he wants to do. He doesn't just jump right in and start talking to everybody. He kind of looks at everything and then he puts little feelers out there and he starts to go. And so when he starts to meet these people where, maybe he hasn't met them before, but he sees how I'm interacting with them, so he's going to feed off of my vibes, or he sees the trust that I have with these people or the relationship I have with them. That third thing is when he does meet some of these people face to face for the first time, it's amazing to see the types of reactions, not only that most adults, and sometimes we get to meet some of their kids have, but it's amazing to see the kind of reaction that he has too, because once again, this world is such a small place and digital and technology is changing it where, on this next trip that we take, we're just going to be meeting people that it's going to be for the very first time, but we've been watching their videos for months and they've been watching ours. And it's like a friendship that's just developed over technology that we're now just taking it in person and meeting them for real. So it's really neat to see.
I think we're doing somewhat the same thing with our books. My brother passed, and there was a 13-year period from when he died to when I wrote the first words of the book. And I'm now sharing my brother's life and the life that he lived and the magic that was his greatness with the world after he lived it. You're sharing your son's life as it's happening with people so that he can grow up with the books in their lives. I think that's cool. I just think that's really a unique perspective that you can see as it's happening, the effect it's having on people and the impact it's having in their lives. And I think that's something that as he gets a little bit older and starts to be a little bit more aware of the magnitude of what's happening, that hopefully he appreciates how cool that is.
You know what? That's a really good observation. And I do believe that, you know, thankfully he's intelligent like his mom. He took all of her genes. So that was good to see. I mean, from both of us, of course, but I agree with you 100% because just imagine this, you know, by the time it comes time for him to do whatever it is he chooses to do along and through his life, he's already going to have this community of people that are around there that he's both going to help out and they're going to help them or help him, you know, and it's just building up that community so that when he's ready to start, you know, doing things and finding other people to do things with, you know, collaborate on, and that community building, I hope that I'm building that community and surrounding him with the right sorts of people, and that the right sorts of people are in his life, or that he continues to add them into his network, into his life. And I do think that at some point when he starts to understand the impact that he does have, I have no doubt that he will do the right things to continue building and fostering those relationships and helping other people to achieve what they want to achieve, not just what he wants. Like I truly believe that he's going to do what he needs to do to make this place a better place.
Well, and I think that we go back to the role of the father. You know, my son, you know, he gave me, my son is a lot like me in that he wears his heart on his sleeve. He is a patriot. He is, as he said yesterday, Dad, I bleed red, white, and blue. You know, he's a kid that wants to serve his country. He wants to be remembered for being a patriot. He wants that greatness to exude towards a greater purpose. And he wrote in my card, and then I love cards from my kids because they always write something in it, and my wife as well. But it's that Hallmark does a great job of writing their cards out, but it's what's written in pen or pencil inside the card that I actually give a shit about. The card itself is what it is, but the time that my kids took to write what they wrote is important. And my son wrote, "Thank you for always expecting me to be great and pushing me to do that."
Nah, that's awesome.
And I want that in my son. Like I want him to expect greatness and know that the effort that's required to achieve that is great. And it's not something that's ever going to come easy. It's not something that doesn't come with a price tag, and it's not something that everyone is going to appreciate at the moment when you do it. And I think, but knowing that you are in the process of doing great things is a powerful feeling. And I think when, as a father and as a Marine especially, you're instilling that in your son. You know, I watch your videos. I think they're cool. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a fan. I like the hat switch today. That was nice one. But it's one of those things where when you can see how he watches you, and you know he's absorbing, and when you know they're absorbing what you're saying, you're a lot more cognizant and intentional with what you do.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that sometimes is missing in fathers today. You know, as a cop, unfortunately, and part of the reason why I do need to step back and get away from people a lot of the times is because I do see the shit 90% of the time. I'm not around all the great moments in people's families. I'm around the worst moments. Yeah. And I don't really get to see all the celebrations. I see all the turmoil. And what I see when I'm at the houses where there's a lot of turmoil and there's a lot of chaos is that the son is actually mimicking the father. And that had the father taken any intentional effort in creating this young man that stands before me, we would be having the conversation we're having at that moment. And I think when you realize that your kids are watching you, when your son's watching you, and he's absorbing everything that you say and do, that's who they're going to become later on in life. And I was lucky enough that my dad left when I was 9 months old. And I had a mom who taught me how to vacuum, taught me how to clean a toilet. I can love harder and discipline harder and forgive better because of her than I would have ever gotten from my biological father. And then, but that's that absorption. You know, I can remember every conversation I had with my mom growing up, like it was yesterday, and that stays in you. So I think what you're doing for Ohm in setting that example, and it's and I don't know if it's intentional or not, but what I look at when I watch your videos is this is almost your accountability clause. It forces you, because you're putting it out into the universe in video and in book form, to be that dad that is allowing his son to absorb the things he's supposed to absorb, right?
100%. Very, very much. There's purpose and intent behind it. And I think you're spot on, because my wife made this comment to me a year and a half ago. We're both before the LinkedIn videos came out. I wouldn't say private people, but social media wasn't something that, it was an unknown, right? I wasn't a person who went out on Facebook and put out pictures of, my living room in my pajamas with my son, right? I mean, that didn't exist. We didn't do that. And so she did have some concerns, and some, we had a lot of great conversations around, here we are sharing our lives, especially Ohm's lives, with people, like what, and her background is she's a physician. So she's got, much like your service, right, or your career, she's exposed to, unfortunately, not the best of the best, sometimes the worst of the worst. And so her concern was always about protection of our family. And so I love the fact that you say, you can remember every conversation that you have with your mom, because that was your strength. So, just the strength of a parent. Doesn't have to just be a dad, doesn't have to be just a mom, but a strength of a parent, right? Creating that purpose, that intent, that accountability, and quite frankly, just being present in your children or child's life, in this case, for us. For me, 100% absolutely. Like when I'm on camera, how I act with him is how I am in real life. And we were talking about this before the show too, is where sometimes, those lights go off and the cameras go off, and all of a sudden you got Jekyll and Hyde, or you've got just somebody totally different. And for me, I think once again, tie it back into LinkedIn video, is I know without a doubt that it's helped me to become a better dad. Hopefully a better son to my parents, a better, husband, a better, everything, because I've had purpose. I've had, the ability to tell myself, this is what I want to do with this. This is my why. And it's made me rethink a lot of things, both from professional and personal development. So, from the business world, my career, the things that I do now, the intentions that I take, the people that I speak to, the ones that I want to give my time to. Like, I've become a lot more aware of what my time means to me, because at the end of the day, it impacts Ohm. So whatever time I'm spending somewhere else, if it impacts him. So for example, his mom is giving him a shower and is doing his reading in his books, because so 2 dates in a dash and talking with you was that important to share our story with other people, that now I know my time is well spent. This is meaningful, because now there are other people that are going to hear that. Here's what that relationship is between Sonny and Ohm. And I'm not telling people to go out there and you have to replicate what we're doing. No, it's every person has their own journey to take, their own story to tell. And mine and Ohm's just happens to be, here's what we want people to hear about us and what we think is important. But my favorite part about it is when people are like, well, what about this? Or what about that? Or just like this story about your mom or your own kids. And when people share those with me, it gives me more to share back, because then I know that I'm talking about what, just like your audience and your viewers, whatever it is that they want to hear, that's what we want to make sure that the value, that's what we're bringing to them, is the stories of our interactions remind you of some great memory, or maybe even a memory that wasn't so great. So for example, when my dad-in-law passed, that's a bittersweet moment. In our book, he passed before we were actually going to launch our book. And so I worked with my publishers to say, I've got to change the forward in this book to give, a one-line respect to him because he passed. So it was a bittersweet moment that this book came out, and he got to see the digital version of it. He never got to see the print version of it, but he knew what the book was all about, and for us, that legacy or that tradition of putting that one line in there, while it can't, clearly bring them back or make the memory any, less hurtful, but it's kind of paying that tradition forward. And the reason why I share that is because Ohm, I believe very much in family and legacy. Ohm is actually, the way we named Ohm is my grandfather gave me my name when I was born. So Sonny. So, the very first name that I got when I was born, he gave it to me. And so to pass on his tradition and his legacy, I gave my firstborn his name. And I actually had to talk to my dad, his brothers and sisters, because I have yet to, in all my dealings of any story about my grandfather, Ohm, I have never heard one negative thing ever said about this man. Like, all he ever did, literally the shirt off his back, that was this guy. Everything that he taught my little brother how to play poker. He taught all his family member, he put them all through schools. He worked hard to make sure they were taken care of. And so for me, I had to make sure that if I was going to name my son after this great man and to carry on that name, I had to do the due diligence and check with everybody. Would they be okay if Ohm was named Ohm? And I have no doubt the way that he's acting now, he's going to carry on that name and he's going to do great things. So I know for no doubt that he's got that spirit in him. And hopefully he'll impact others in that positive manner as well.
I think I love stories behind names. My son was named after my brother, and my daughter, obviously I didn't name her after my brother. That would have been weird. But her middle name, so my grandfather, my German grandfather, his last name was Linnemeyer, which is a very long name. And my brother's middle name was Linnemeyer. And I wasn't going to saddle anybody with that name. If you ever, when we were little, we had to write your first, middle, and last name out. And my brother was autistic. So him writing that out was quite the ordeal. So for my daughter, I shortened it to, her name's Rebecca Lynn, but I spelled Lynn, Linne, which is the first 5 letters of Linnemeyer. So, awesome. And my son is Andrew, obviously, after my son Andy, after my brother Andy. So I love hearing name stories as to why you chose to name your son or daughter after something, because I think, and then when you share that with your son, and it's my son now, one of the greatest joys he has is knowing that he's named after my brother. Mm-hmm. And he feels this ungodly, and I could tell weird stories all day long about my son's connection with my brother. One of which is that I'll tell this one. And I've told this on another person's podcast before, but so my son had when he was like, his first bed was a platform bed where he had a crawl space underneath. And we would lay in bed every night, and he had this frog that played music, and we'd read stories and we'd talk, and he wouldn't shut the hell up. He'd talk like there was no tomorrow. He just nonstop, and he would never go to sleep. But and it was like a 20-minute ordeal laying in bed with him and just having these conversations. And then one day he goes, "Dad, why did Uncle Andy talk weird?" Now, my son was about 5 or 6 at the time, and I'd never once mentioned that my brother stuttered. Never. Because it's not, to a 6-year-old, it's not important for him to know that part yet. Just that his Uncle Andy loved him and he was a great person and all that stuff. I told him I never had any conversations about my brother's stutter. So I said to Andrew, I said, "What do you mean he talked funny?" He goes, "Well, Uncle Andy, every night when he talks to me, he goes, I, and I'm like, Uncle Andy, I can't understand you." And it blew my mind. And I said, "Well, where's Uncle Andy?" He goes, "He lives under my bed."
Wow. I
said, "Really?" And he goes, "Yeah. And sometimes I have to close the door because he's too loud, because there's like a little door opening to the bottom of the bed. And he would usually leave it open because the air conditioning vent was actually under the bed because he had a small bedroom. And so we'd leave the door open, but he would get up and close the door because Uncle Andy was talking too loud." Oh. But the fact that he made the stuttering sound, mm-hmm. and he would have conversations with my brother constantly. And he would wake up in the morning and tell me about conversations with Uncle Andy. And there's this connection that he's had to my brother that I just love that. I love that
Yeah.
connectivity. And when your dad or your grandfather and are going to have that type of connection, and that's the cool thing.
Yeah, I agree. That's wild, absolutely wild. But how cool is that?
It's what makes things seem right. Like it makes sense to an otherwise horrendous moment in my life. It sort of brings a little bit of that healing component to it, to where I'm like, all right, things are cool.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that, because I was just trying to think back to there are moments now where, so my wife used to her and her sister, so they used to spend time talking with their dad, because they both lived in different countries for many, many years, traveled quite a bit. And I think you're absolutely right. It's those moments where like it brings back like a memory. So for example, right now, there's the ICC, so the Cricket World Cup is going on right now worldwide. So on Sunday, we actually watched a huge, India versus Pakistan, which is traditionally, it would be kind of like, actually, it's not even on the same scale, but it would be like if Baltimore played Pittsburgh, or if you have like a major rival playing against each other. That's what India and Pakistan represents, but like to the nth degree, because it's just years of political strife, and here's just the meaning of this game. And the reason I bring that up is because my wife and her dad, and so you talk about your son and like that memory, that triggered memory of you and your mom, right? So the conversations you had. So when we were watching this match, she had this triggered memory of when she was 4. And I was like, I don't even remember stuff when I was 4 years old, but had this triggered memory of when she was 4 years old and watching cricket with her dad and all of her uncles, as she was growing up. And so that kind of that bittersweet moment, but made you know that everything was okay, was we're sitting here watching this match, and she's like, you know what? I miss my dad, but I know he's probably smiling down and just watching this match, and just, their team, India, won. And so it was just nice to be able to hear that kind of conversation, because, I have not experienced the loss, of a parent, and, knock on whatever else, I don't, and, it's the reality of life. So I'll be there soon enough, eventually at some point. So it's like, I can't imagine what it must have felt like for her to lose, somebody like that in her life. But then to have that positive memory, or to have something that she's doing now, and having our son with us there watching it, and she's teaching him, the cricket signs and whatnot, and him doing it as a 3-year-old. I mean, like, that's what I was reminded of when you talked about your mom's and the conversations with your mom. And it's like those little moments, that's what makes you think that, okay, things can be okay, and that there are those positive moments. And those are the things that we should gravitate towards.
100% agree, brother. I want to talk a little bit about your military service. I would be remiss not to talk about why 28. Did you wait till that long? Why the Marine Corps? Like, what was the genesis of that decision?
Yeah, another great question. So I actually always wanted to fly jets. And I was living in either Southern California or New Mexico at the time. I had told my parents, I was going to finish university, get a degree, but I always wanted to fly jets. And so I happened to be, living near a pretty significant recruiting station, Air Force, Marine Corps, I think Navy. Those three were actually in the exact same building, 3 doors apart. And so I don't remember where the Army recruiting office was, sorry, but I'm sure they were there too, right? They probably had like the top floor in a penthouse or something. So
right.
So I walk into the Air Force recruiting, and I was like, hey, I've always wanted to be a pilot. And, recruiters, to all the recruiters that are out there, you're absolutely outstanding. You're the best salespeople in the world. Reach out to Matt. Apparently he needs some help to sell his book. But they are the best. They're absolutely the best. They are so good at just getting people to sign on the dotted line. And I walked in there and I said, I want to be a pilot. And they looked at me and they're like, how old are you, Grandpa? And I was like, Grandpa? I was like, what? And they're like, yeah, how old are you? And I was like, well, I'm 28. And they're like, you're no good to us. I'm like, what are you talking about? They're like, we could only get like 2 good years out of you. And at first I was very hard-headed. I'm still pretty stubborn, but I was very hard-headed. And, you know, I was always right and nobody else was right. If it wasn't my perspective, it was definitely my way or the highway. And I said, there's no way. I said, give me whatever tests you can and I'll prove you all wrong. And they're, no, it's not the fact of any type of physical test. It's just, you're well past your prime. Like we're about to invest, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars into your training and we're not going to get our ROI on you. And they're like, but if you want, you know, there's a Marine Corps recruiting station next door and I'm sure they're always looking for people. And I was like, man, and I walked out. I was so pissed off. And I think I actually drove off and didn't come back. And then, you know, I was thinking about it and I actually went back and I, you know, tried to talk to a different recruiter and they were just like, yeah, you're the grandpa. Sorry, we don't want you, just next door, right? So I walk into the Marine Corps recruiting station and it was a gunnery sergeant that was in there. And he goes, yeah, you know, can we help you? And there was a couple of poolies that were in there doing some pull-ups and training. So people that were training to go into boot camp in a few months, they were just starting to get into shape. And they looked at me and they were like, so what brings you in here? I was like, the guys next door said that I'm too old to join. And they suggested I come next door. And they're like, well, how old are you? I'm like, well, I'm 28. And they kind of looked at me like, you know, I don't know if you could take the physical, you know, rigors of our training. And I was like, sign me up. What do I got to do? Just tell me what I got to do to prove myself. And so they put me through the PT session. I crushed them all. And I played sports in college. So I consider myself in great shape. I got to tell you right now, boot camp and any rigors of any military service, your body just gets demolished. And mind you, I was 28. So I was about in all, you know, for all intents and purposes, 10 years past my prime. So I was definitely feeling it when I did that, but I crushed them and they're like, you know what? We're going to get a waiver for you and we'll get you in there. And so I joined the Marine Corps and I did it because I wanted to challenge myself physically. And I wanted to know, could I do it? Could I be part of the best? And then as I started reading up on the Marine Corps, you know, my favorite, you know, thing that I found out was when the president picks up the red phone, you know, it's Commandant of the Marine Corps. So, you know, like the bat phone, he's picking it up. Well, it's the devil dog phone. And so I was like, okay, you know, maybe I'm onto something here. Hands down, the story that I told you about my dad and being there to shape my life, hands down, joining the Marine Corps made me who I am as well. I absolutely learned about leadership and, you know, executive decision making and, you know, our two tenets, right? So mission accomplishment and troop welfare. And sometimes when you're a good leader, they do go hand in hand. And so for me, I learned how to become a leader, how to be an effective leader, and more importantly, how to make sure that my perspectives were inclusive of more than just me. And so all of a sudden, my way or the highway wasn't quite so much that important. And it didn't happen overnight. You know, first of all, I had to physically get right, and then mentally I had to get right. But I was lucky enough to have more great leaders that shaped me than bad leaders. And the bad leaders were good too, because they taught me what not to do. Yeah. And so every enlisted, you know, staff NCO or below, always all you ever see is, oh, well, that's what that one's doing. And all you hear is bickering and moaning, complaining. But the good leaders were the ones that said, well, that's what you don't do to become a good and an effective leader. And I was lucky enough to have leaders that I believed enough in that if they asked me to do something, I was doing it before they were even done asking for it. Those are the kind of leaders that I had that helped to shape me. And so, you know, my military service, both in the States and when deployed, you know, every single thing that I ever learned through the Marine Corps was just about that, was to how to become a better leader, but more importantly, how to bring out the best in others. And so, you know, my goal was always to train my young leaders. So my fire team leaders, my squad leaders, you know, eventually platoon leaders. So it was always to train them to take my place. And it wasn't just because I didn't want to be there for them, but it was, I wanted them to have the ability to become leaders themselves. And they might not have the same style as me, because I would learn from them as well, good and bad. And I was very much about having those types of conversations to say, what can you do to become a more effective leader? And what does it take to understand how to get the best out of anybody that you're working with? And so for me, my military career helped me to apply that, not only in the military, but in the civilian world. And I can tell you that, and this is for all transitioning veterans or service members that are out there or getting ready to transition, it didn't happen overnight. The first couple of years when I got out of the military, I was probably just like everybody else, where guess what? You can't operate in the civilian world like we do in the military. The mentality is just wildly different. But there's a lot of good leadership qualities and skills and things that are ingrained in us that we can help bring to the civilian world. We just have to learn how to communicate that and really convey that message in a little bit of a different manner. And if you can, once you start to figure those things out, I mean, every service member can be just as successful in the civilian world as we were in the military.
We're in a world now where, for the last 17, 18 years, every person that's gone into the military on some level has been involved in conflict. Between the Vietnam War and, say, Grenada, there was nothing. People did 25 years and never left the United States for anything other than an overseas 2-year stint at a really nice place, and never had to worry about being deployed. I don't foresee that ending anytime soon, because I think that's just the world we're in right now, where once you open Pandora's box, aka the Middle East, you can't close it. And do you see? I guess the reason I bring this up is, in 15 years, Ohm is going to be 14 years. Ohm is going to be 18 years old, and he's going to have an opportunity to go to college, do a trade, join the military. Would you, knowing what you know and what you've been through in your life and the places in the world you've seen, would you limit Ohm's ability or steer him away from the military, knowing that we're now in a world where conflict is literally a guarantee?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll give an example of. So the short answer is I would not limit him to do what he wants to do. In fact, I would. Maybe in 10 years when we keep having conversations, maybe my mind will change a little bit based on what's going on in the world. But I would like to believe that no matter what he chooses to do, that I'll be there to give him an informed guidance on, what are good, bad, pros and cons of whatever it is that he wants to do. But ultimately, I'd love to believe that I'm going to allow him the opportunity to make his own decisions with guidance from myself and my wife and other family members if he chooses to do so. But I think back to some of the countries, and I think of two because I've had friends that and coworkers that are in this, right? So you think about Israel and Singapore, where they have mandatory military services. I think it's when you're 18, you serve 2 years, and then I think they go into the reserves. But you look at the types of, and I'm not just saying only Israel and Singapore, but I'm saying that they are given this structure and this foundation of, like patriotism and doing things that when your country calls upon you, that you're there to serve for them. And I've had great conversations with those friends from those countries where they're like, yeah, it was something that we absolutely loved and helped us to become who we are now too. And is that something around the world where there's mandatory military service? No, I mean, there's good and bad about that. But I think that maybe that's something when we look at this current state of affairs, the current state of the world, where how are people parenting today versus how are they parenting 15 or 20 years ago? And look, I'm not even a first generation. So I was born in India. And I served in the Marine Corps. So I'm not, my son is a first generation actually, in my family. So, and my brother is as well, first generation. So I'm an immigrant. And so is that something that should be mandatory to help foster that love of patriotism? Maybe, maybe not, because much like you, when I was raised, there was a different level of parenting versus what we see today. And right. I'm talking about all the generations that are now here as well as are coming up. There's just a different style of parenting. And so would military service maybe help him to, lay the foundation of himself, or maybe realize what it takes to serve, or, I think there's plenty of different ways that he can give back to his community and to his country. But I think, the ultimate answer is, what does he want to do? So what does Ohm want to do, 14, 15, 16 years down the road? And I can tell you for sure, I'm not talking about the traditional mindset, but education. Education will definitely be something that his mom and I focus on. And what I mean by that is this. Why are we exposing him to the world? Why are we taking him on these trips around the world to go experience other cultures and diversity and inclusiveness of other people and experiencing what their life is like? Because that, we feel, is an education that's going to make him a more well-rounded individual. If he can understand what other people are experiencing and living and doing, then we feel that he can now have a better appreciation of what he can do, or what it is that his role is in the world of whatever it is that he's going to choose to do, be it a chef, be it a military person, be it an astronaut, be it whatever he chooses to do. I mean, 10 years from now, there's probably going to be some other jobs that never existed. I mean, we never had cybersecurity, 15, 20 years ago. Heck, we never had social media content managers, right? We never had Instagram influencers or podcasters. So who knows what's going to be out there in 14 and 15 years? Maybe he invents his own career path, his own job, or whatever it is he chooses to do. I just want to make sure that I'm there to support him along the way. And if he chooses to do something in the military or something that he feels is a passion that he wants to do, that's what I want him to do. I want him to chase what he's going to be passionate about and continue to figure out what it is. Because if you look at my track record, I'm continuing to figure out things I'm doing, and I'm absolutely lucky that I have the opportunity to go after the things that I'm passionate about. And it's okay. It's okay if it changes. It doesn't have to be the exact same thing every single day. So that's what's important. Chase after what his passion is.
Well, I love it, brother. We're about ready to close up the show. Let's give everybody your websites, anywhere where they can find you, where they can find the book, any of that information. Give it to them.
Absolutely. So the book can be found on Amazon. It can be found on Barnes & Noble. I think it's actually, for our international viewers, we can find it on Ingram. But if you like to come out to our website, eyesofom.com. So we've tried to keep it as simple as we possibly could for people. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we're on LinkedIn. But all I would say is this: connect with me on LinkedIn. And more importantly, if you ever want to chat, just shoot us a message. We're always happy to talk.
I love it, brother. Hang tight. Don't go anywhere. I'm going to close out the show. Everybody, thank you again for watching another episode of the Two Dates in the Dash podcast. I'm your host, Matt Cubbler. Thank you again to my special guest, Sonny Tannan. Thank you to his ability to share his vision for his son, Ohm, and the way that they're sharing their lives together in the books that he's writing and the videos he's creating. I appreciate everybody taking the time to watch. I appreciate you caring about the guests that I have on the show. And I am forever grateful to each and every one of you. And for God's sakes, go out and be kind to one another.